inaugural event, our first event of this sort. We're currently in the thick of South Asian History Month, and it felt remiss to go through that entire month without talking at least a little bit about the Bangali story. And when I say that, and when we've talked about this, I think we've come to realise that that means different things to different people, that means different things to different parts of the diaspora, depending on when you left Bengal, your roots to Bengal, etc. And so what you'll hear tonight is 3 unique perspectives, unique Bangali stories to be shared with you all. But by no means does this mean that the 3 or 4 of us here today are speaking on behalf of all the Bangalis in the room today. And so your stories are just as important as the ones we're going to talk about today. And we hope through this platform we can spotlight and share some of these amazing, fantastic stories that we have in our community, but we just don't talk about enough and celebrate enough. So, with that, I think it'd just be good to think about, I guess from my perspective, why am I here? What compelled me to do this? When I think about my relationship, or I guess my Bangali story, I spent a lot of my childhood sort of detached from what it meant to be Bangali, detached from my identity as a Bangali person. I've grown to develop that and connect to that myself over time, and what it sort of left me with was this sense of a sort of inner competition between my Britishness and my Bangaliness. And it wasn't the case that I think the sort of common trope in South Asian diaspora communities is I'm not Western enough, I'm not Eastern enough, but it's not that. I felt plenty British and I felt plenty Bangali actually. But it's more the sense that the 2 parts of myself were in opposition with one another. I was oppressing myself in a way through my British heritage and my Bangali heritage. And the more I connected to my Bangali roots, the more that dissonance grew. And at times I think it led to anger and frustration about what it meant to be me, actually. And so I think it's also led to moments of healing and reflection and growth. And I think through connecting deeper to what it means to be Bangali and my roots, I've grown more comfortable with the whole of that. And so that's a very tiny bit about kind of why I'm here today and what I kind of want to bring to the table a little bit. Without further ado, then, I think it's time to introduce our 3 amazing panelists who are going to be speaking to you all today. Before I do that, I've been very kindly reminded that we should do some house rules. So if you wouldn't mind, please keep phones on silent. Please keep mouths on silent. If you need to talk, that's completely fine. If you need to take a phone call, completely fine. Please just either go downstairs or outside. The signal's better outside than downstairs. There are 2 bathrooms. Unfortunately, one is located directly behind us. So if you need the loo at any point, please go downstairs, and it's just to the right of the big room downstairs. If you need to get some food, please just wait till the end of the event. There is still more food going. You may grab some afterwards. And also, as part of tonight, we've left on everyone's tables some small pieces of paper and some pens. And so we'd like you to ask us questions, really, because whilst part of this is about the panel discussion, we also want to open it up to questions and reflections from the audience as well on the things you've heard or maybe your own perspectives that you want to share today. So please feel free to get involved with that. And then last bit of admin is right at the end, we do have a QR code. And again, it's the big QR code and all the A4 pieces of paper above where it gives you links to our social medias. That's a link for feedback because, as I said, this is the first time we're doing such an event, so it'd be really nice to know what people vibed with, what people thought could be different, and in general, just what people want to see if they were to come to something like this in the future. So, without further ado, I will come to talk about our 3 lovely panelists in no particular order. I wanted to start with, in the middle, we have Mohua Chinappa. Mohua is an author of 4 books. She's a host of a podcast which spotlights Bangali artists and pioneers, which has, at the time of writing, 5 million downloads on Spotify. But when we were talking before this, Mohua didn't want me to focus on that. She wanted me to focus on the struggle that led to that point and that kind of underlined all of this success. She's spoken about her previous uncertainty in terms of her Bangali identity, right down to her name and whether she felt comfortable walking around with it, as well as her career and how it stemmed from a life as a homemaker, with eventually progressing to her becoming a very confident, very established writer in her own regard, but at a much later point in life than some may have thought possible. Mohua, in her writing, speaks beautifully about what it means to be displaced from Bengal, what it means to be chased from your home, detached from the people you care about and love, to have everything taken from you, but then to rebuild again, and start again, not once but twice in her lifetime. She's spoken about her connection to home, and I hope that tonight is part of the way that you can continue on that amazing journey that you've been on through your life. Next up, we have, next to me here on the left, Sanju. Sanju is an incredible person. She runs an education charity called Rise, which is a school that supports children below the poverty line in rural Bengal. But not only does she do that, she started this when she was working full-time at Accenture, where she'd been for many years. Prior to that, she'd worked as a teacher and always has advocated her whole life for social justice, particularly for South Asian people. When we spoke, you said you inherited this from your father, and his love of social justice and uplifting his people around him and being a sounding board for people who struggled in the community and never leaving anyone behind. And I thought that was really beautiful, that you continue to do that in your work as well. Amongst many amazing accolades that Sanju's received for her work, she received the Prime Minister's Points of Light Award. She met the late Queen Elizabeth at Buckingham Palace for youth education and Commonwealth reception. And as well as that, she continues to be an advocate for women with endometriosis and women's health issues who face discrimination in the workplace, again, following from her own experiences in the real world. So all of that is fantastic work. Last but certainly not least, we have Sohini Banerjee. Wow, fan club. Sohini is the founder of Smoke and Lime, which is, how do we describe Smoke and Lime, I wonder? Sohini hosts amazing supper clubs. I feel very shy talking about this because I'm very much part of these supper clubs. So, full disclosure, I am married to Sohini. I had that early on in case there was any misconceptions. I'm here on merit, though. Sohini is an incredible chef. She runs a business that has gone from her hosting small dinners to very few people and taking the name and the brand of Smoke and Lime across the world. She's gained recognition in numerous publications, including The Telegraph in India, Times in India, and also Vogue in the UK, not once but twice. She's been featured for her supper clubs and her food. And she's featured on a number of podcasts and other platforms talking about not just Bengali food, but food education and spreading the message of rural Bengali cooking and heritage food from our homeland. And so this feels like a very natural extension for you to be here today talking about all things Bengali to a very engaged, hopefully, audience. So thank you, guys. So I wanted to get things started in terms of the actual discussion today. Let's start things off really simply. Mohua, what's your duck now?
We generally don't talk about your duck name in front of everyone.
Sorry. I thought we're family here.
It's Manu. Manu.
Manu. Okay, beautiful. And Sohini, what's your duck name?
I have so many duck names actually, so this is a bit of a, I don't know which one to pick. Rima is the most common duck name, and for a long time of my life, when people couldn't say Sohini, I'd tell them to just call me Rima because they couldn't say my name. But now I do tell people to call me Sohini. But I have a lot of other duck names too.
Hello. Testing. This is a very sensitive topic for me because I don't have a duck name. I didn't get a duck name.
Audible.
And my Lily, who's sitting there, she got a duck name. Me. One name, Sanju, that I've spent my entire life trying to get people to pronounce correctly. using like the sun shone upon the Jew. Obviously the name Sanju, it's like, what is that? Is that even a name? Like, is that short for Sanjay? So most people think I'm a boy. I have so many variations of Sanju. I think my favorite is Sangu. Yeah, I could go on, but I shan't.
So no Daknam for Shonji, but that's okay. Well, I don't have a Daknam either for what it's worth. It's probably disclosed. Oh, awkward. So with the theme of South Asian Heritage or History Month being roots to roots, roots as in the plant roots and then road roots, respectively, I wanted to ask the panel, what are your roots?
Thank you so much. That's a really loaded question, because I think Bengalis are one community, just like the Punjabis in India, who've always struggled with their identity, their roots. We are people who have been forced due to political situations all across India, before Bengal was partitioned, and even post that, which a lot of people even now in India don't talk about. So I have a lot of difficulty when people ask me this question, and I have been constantly trying to search for this answer. Where are my roots? A lot of people don't know this, but even in India, that in Assam there was this Bangali Story, where every Bengali was asked to leave, and that got percolated into Shillong, where I grew up. And Bengalis were overnight purged out from the state. And when I shut my eyes at night, I often, if I'm very troubled, I think of Shillong, but I know I can't go back there because my home has been destroyed and taken over. When I think about Delhi, because that's where we moved, most Bengalis moved into West Bengal or into the Barak Valley in Assam, where again, over 1 million people were purged out, and India doesn't talk about it, even now. And then after Delhi, I came into Bangalore. I don't know where home is. I think my home is where my son lives, and that's London, so that's home with him. Yeah, so.
Beautiful, thank you. Shoni?
Okay. I don't actually know where home is either. For the most part of my life, I grew up in Kolkata till I was like 8/9. Moved to the UK, lived in the northwest, and have been in London now for a decade. So I want to call London home because I feel very at home in London. I can speak in Bangla loudly down the street and no one really looks at me, so that's great. But I really feel home for me is still probably my grandparents' house in Kolkata. It's what I dream of the most. In most of my dreams, that's the location. So I like to think that that's still home. And even as an adult, leaving that home, even I know when I work here, I do everything here, it's still quite hard. So it's interesting because the UK technically should be my home. I've been here most of my life, and I get a lot of accent hate recently, and it makes me doubt where I actually am from.
Hi, my best friend in the world, Nora's just come in. Say hi to everyone, Nora. There is space over here. So. Nora's visited our roots, actually. Where are our roots? Our roots are in a place that's apparently no longer on the map, called Madhya, in the Nadia district, but on the eastern side of the border of when the Brits first partitioned Bengal in 1905. And then we moved on to another little place called Chitolia, and a word that I've heard all my life, Kushtia Jela. That's now on the eastern side of the border. And then 75 years ago exactly, post the partition of India, we don't say independence as much in our home, we say Deshbhag. The day that Desh was separated, the roots have ended up in a gram called Shonnanga, still in Nadia Jela, but are now on the western side of the border. And my roots in Shonnanga, they're so strongly there. I have been going to Shonnanga ever since I was teeny tiny with my Didi, with Nora, with Adi, who's also in the room. A few of my other friends have been blessed to see this beautiful part of Nadia, this beautiful part of, the Gram, the village of West Bengal, now West Bengal. And I'm honoured to be able to trace those roots. And I think that's such an interesting, loaded question because I think a lot of us don't necessarily know. And I think part of South Asian Heritage Month is about inviting us to ask those questions of our elders. I have a Vishi who's 95, she's like the matriarch of Shonnanga, unmarried, but just still there, just with all the knowledge. And I constantly, often, I'm trying to think, I constantly think I need to be asking her regularly about these roots, about these stories, because they are beautiful. And that's what this evening is about, you know, evoking sort of our own memories, but hopefully evoking for you, what are your roots? And it's a question that hopefully we can all go back tonight and be like, hang on, if we don't know it, who can we ask? How can we find that out? Because it's so important. And yeah, it's too important.
I'm really struck by how, in all of your cases, I think you can trace back from your roots decisions that you've made in the present day and the directions you've taken as well. And so I sort of want to ask, on that topic, how have your roots then informed your roots through the world?
Well, mine was a very ill-informed route, R-O-U-T, to the world, because when the riots in the insurgency actually began in Shillong, I was just 7 years old. I just understood that if you were to tell people that you're Bengali, you can get beaten up, you can, you will have a broken wrist, a broken jaw, and anything can happen to you. And that's when the insurgency began, and we were cut off, school was shut in Shillong, and there was the BSF that was called in, and there was curfew, and there was shoot at sight order, which the rest of India did not know at all. And here were Bengalis who had called Shillong home for years on end, had spent their money in creating property. We were all asked to leave. The army would come and sit in our living room, and these were men. And fortunately, my father had a job which took him to Delhi, and he was gone, and we couldn't leave, it was Ma and me. And so the roots from there began, where I started hiding the fact that I am really Bengali, soul, heart, and consciousness, I'm Bengali. And I just felt that acceptance would come if I would not be as Bengali as I should be. And it's only this that after my Baba passed away about 3.5 years now, and I have Ghazala and Sham who met my father, and after Baba passed away is when I started really questioning, who am I, where am I, what are these people all around me, can I talk to them in my language, my Daknam is lost forever, and my food, I'll not be able to really eat some of the vegetables that are grown only in Bengal, and you will not get that elsewhere. So it's just now, I'm 55 years old now, and it's only now, since the last 1 year now, that I've begun to embrace my roots. And it's been a long journey of illness, subjugation, watching people die, watching your neighbors being pulled away from their homes, knowing in the middle of the night that there have been the tribals who wanted us out, the locals who wanted us out from Shillong, coming to light up the whole house. And my mother stood there with me, looking at me and saying that even if we die today, it's okay, we'll be fine. And I think God just wanted me to write about all of this. And at that moment, the CRPF just passed over our heads on the house, and the insurgents had to run away. So these kind of incidents were constantly happening around me. So I knew that if I were to say that I'm Bengali, I would probably face this discrimination again and again and again. So that's my route.
Wow, amazing. And I wanted to kind of pick up on something that you said, which is that connection to your homeland is also through food, and that that distance from being able to just grow up with food that you would have eaten, and losing that over time.
Yes.
You've spoken about how strongly that hurt.
Yeah. I get extremely emotional when I talk about it.
Yes, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
Yeah. No. I mean, it's because I think Bengalis as a community, we have faced so much of trauma with the environment. If you look at the number of floods that Bengal has had after the partition, it's unbelievable that we can actually still be sitting here and still continuing to keep up. So I was writing down these numbers. We've had floods in 1954, 1970, 1974, 1987, 1998, 1999, 1977, 2000. And we've constantly been rising up from each of these floods. Today in the Sundarbans, because of the climate change, the sea levels are rising. There are 4 islands that have completely gone underwater. And we do not talk about the trafficking that happens there. You know, because they have no other way to earn their living, because they have been living in those places where they're, you know, tilling the land, or, you know, going in there to bring honey from the forest and sell it. They go into places like Bombay, and these are grandmothers who go in there for, you know, as in the sex trafficking business, and then they try and earn some money. They come back broken, and they're not accepted back home. And it is happening right now while we are sitting here and talking. So this has been going on. So yeah.
And I was actually going to come to Sohini, if that's right.
That's fine by me.
Because through your work and through your food, I think you've always shone a spotlight on food from famine, food during leaner times, and maybe food during floods, food when it was scarcer, and giving that its credit. So I kind of wanted you to talk a little bit about your roots to food, through your kind of background and heritage, but then also the type of food that you choose to cook.
So my roots into food were fairly long, I would say, because I didn't cook when I was young. I mean, I think a lot of people will agree with this. Like when you grow up, especially in this country as a British Indian, you don't really get allowed into the kitchen. Your mom's doing all the food, you're outside, you're told to do your homework. So I never cooked till I left for university, and I found that a bit of a shock to the system. After eating pizza for about 5 days, I got sick of it. And I think this journey of putting the food out of our people to everyone around me as much as I can, and I've been doing it for the last 8 years now, nearly. I think the root of that has just been, yeah, like you said, and you'll know this obviously, when I started I did a lot of luxury food. So the first 3 to 4 months, I would say, the menu with all the Bangalis here, you'll know to this, there was kosher mangsho, there was some pulao, there was a lot of richer food that everyone kind of knows about. And then I think through my own cooking journey, what I've realized I really want to show off and take the root of is the food of scarcity. It's using everything that I get my hands on to create a menu that I can put a decent price on, but that price is not really for every single dish. It's for my knowledge, for my stories, for all of the expertise that I have honed over the last nearly decade now, to get that to people and take that story forward, so that if you come and eat with me, you go home and then you maybe make some of that food, or you go home and you appreciate that your mom may have made that food, or your grandma may have made that food, and you kind of thank them even if it's silently. Because I feel as Bangalis, especially growing up here, and again, look, I'm talking about my own experience, so I'm not speaking for anyone here. There's a lot of, I think, just a bit of shame, I would say, with food, eating with your hands, eating fish. People make a lot of fun of this stuff. I got made fun of in school. And when I was younger, I think I let that, I think I'm a bit of a, I don't really care what people say, I feel. But I did let that affect me when I was younger. And I think as I've grown up, I've kind of just completely flipped the coin and said, this is what I want to be proud of. Because actually, yes, we do eat all parts of the fish. And it's bloody good. And you should too, without wasting stuff. So it's something that I've come to my own journey with, and it has taken a long time. And I think now I'm really proud of it. I want to take it forward so much more. I want to talk about the food that really does get forgotten about, and that you might not have liked when you were young. I didn't for some things, but now you really want to appreciate it, and you want to find out the root of that food. Like, where does it come from? Why is it there? Bengal has such a rich history of food. I could obviously spend the whole evening talking about that, but some of that, and I believe I'm like, you know, most people will agree with this, that people don't really speak about it. We're very bad at marketing ourselves. As Bengalis, we're really bad at marketing ourselves. And this sort of event is one of the first steps into doing that, I think, from us. But the kind of the shame I'm trying to get rid of is all of that we grew up with. I grew up with, actually, I want to say, of just being told people don't know what we're doing. People don't know what Bangali's history is and how deeply the partition affected Bengal. My great-grandfather was a freedom fighter, spent years of his life in jail. My grandma, who I'm extremely close to, I grew up with her, she still, and Rijul knows this very well because we've tried to ask her a lot, she still cannot talk about what happened. Like, she can't even complete her sentences, and she's, 80 plus now. So we can't even learn from this. It's just, I think, trying to move on past that and show that sort of journey to everyone as much as we can, because it's not really spoken about. And through the food, I think I'm trying to scratch that little surface, because I think food is such a good way to like get people to open up. You give people a big plate of bhat and dal, they'll open up. So that's what I'm trying to do. Hopefully I'm succeeding.
Absolutely. Yeah, you are. Without saying. And Sanju, you also have a deep-rooted tie to partition, as you talked about. And I wanted to ask you how that in particular, and seeing how your father upheld his community, has kind of informed what you do today.
Yeah, interestingly, when Mohua was talking about the floods, that triggered a thought for me. In the year 2000, anyone who went to Bengal during that time will remember, towards the end of the year, really, really difficult. And, you know, I find this just extraordinary to talk about sometimes, because I've been so lucky to go to this rural part of Bengal since I was little. But with that comes a lot of baggage of seeing deprivation. Literally, children, families living below the poverty line. And that is because the Brits came along and they plundered Bengal, and this is the aftermath. And my roots have taken me, because of the British Raj, to a place where I'm like, I want to do something to change the narrative, this entrenched cycle of poverty in rural Bengal. 80% of Bengal, on both sides of the borders, are below the poverty line. And so when I think of the floods, I think of, when I talked about Mohra, when we were at school, we did our first set of fundraising, and we got in touch with British Airways, and they took clothes, and we managed to raise money to rebuild some of these homes that were washed away in the floods. Again, I think of the food that you're talking about, and I think about the children that RISE supports. Some of them don't get one meal a day. We're talking about an average family of 5 people who are living on the equivalent of £75 a month. It is not okay. And the root cause of this actually is a lack of education. And I find that so ironic when I talk to fellow Bangalis who seem to think that we are an accomplished group of people who are so well educated, and we talk of Tagore, and we talk of all these incredible people who've come from Bengal, and rightly so, but we need to remember that 80% of Bengal is still living in poverty. And if I talk about literacy rates, India in particular, Bengal talks about the literacy rate being 80%. That's an absolute falsehood. In the areas that I work, the literacy rate is about 40%. The children that we support at RISE, when they are age 10 and they come to us, they are already at least 3 years below their reading level. We are catching them up. COVID didn't help. For 2 years, government schools were closed across the country. It's outrageous. And so for me, my roots have taken me to a route where, of course, I could do nothing but feel compelled to help these people. And that's what I feel like, if anything, you know, you were talking about storytelling, us all being moved. If we are connected in any way to Bengal, there are things we can do for these young people. Poverty, deprivation, a lack of food is one thing, but we know we cannot climb out of an entrenched cycle of poverty unless there is education. And so that's a huge part of my work. And RISE turned 16 last year. I can hardly believe it. It's because I look 20, I know. It's been a long road, and I've seen little change, attitudinal change in these families who are like, কি বলছো? What are you saying? আমি কি করে স্কুলে পাঠাবো? আমি কি করে খাবো? ওকে পাঠাতে হবে। কাজে পাঠাতে হবে। I have to send her to work because otherwise I'm not going to be able to get some food on the table. Okay, কাকিমা, বুঝতে পারছি, I understand. But, and we've just seen this year another set of young people pass the equivalent of their Madhyamik, their GCSE. The first one in their family to have a qualification. And again, I'll say again, 80% of Bengal, this is not a small number, who are trying their best to climb out of poverty. So yeah, that's my roots. I didn't, that's basically linked to partition. Goddamn partition.
I think we've already ended there, right? Goddamn partition. That fascinating. Three completely different perspectives and stories, but with their origins really in erstwhile Bengal, in partition, in struggle, strife, subjugation, loss, justice or the search for justice. Sanju, you spoke about that we have this notion of, as Bangalis, and we think about all the arts and the Tagore and the Gan and Nach and all this incredible stuff that we're known for, but we kind of have this rose-tinted view on things, particularly when you live away from India, I think. And so it's important to check that as diaspora, to think that not all is well. There are things we can change, and it's amazing that you are doing things to change that. I want to also talk about this idea of the east and west of the divide. And I'm very conscious that in our panel today we do not have someone from the east of the current divide in Bengal, and I think that's important to address. It is something that we spoke about beforehand, and it's something that we're keen to bring back in future talks or future iterations of this, because whilst we wanted to focus on erstwhile or pre-partition Bengal, and therefore we felt it doesn't really matter too much whether you're west or east of that borderline as things stand today, we also appreciate that the fact that we're able to sit here with microphones owes to our privilege of being Indians in this country, and we have a certain, I suppose, status that the Bangladeshi community of today perhaps don't always get, a certain charity that isn't always afforded to that community. So I just wanted to be aware of that as we sit in the room and talk as three people from present-day West Bengal, but very much focusing on pre-partition and our roots. With all of this intergenerational injustice and wrongdoing, how do you think, and this can be to all of you or to any of you, how do you think we can comprehend that, learn from that, and move on whilst also respecting it?
Okay. No.
Okay. So intergenerational trauma, I think all of India is for the first time addressing it. For the first time they are talking about what partition and what it did to the psyche of our elders. Now you are in London, but even in India as we speak, last week, in north of India, there were many Bengali migrants who were asked to leave their homes. And a 14-year-old boy was slapped constantly, I think, 40 times across his face, and he can't open his mouth to eat. So there is a anti-Bengali sentiment even in India. As a Bengali girl, we are slut-shamed because we are apparently very, very easy with men, and you hear that all the time, constantly. I grew up in Delhi, you hear that all the time. You're slut-shamed, you are constantly told, the people who are not Bengalis are told, do not marry a Bengali girl, because if you do that, you're going to constantly be answering questions, and she may just dominate you so much that you will never be able to keep up with her.
Thoughts?
Couldn't disagree more.
So I think intergenerational for me, if I were to look back, I'm trying very hard to break all of that, because I think my father, exactly like what Sohini was talking about, like her grandmother, my father could never ever talk about his eldest brother who went missing in the Chittagong uprising. And just before he passed away, all he wanted to do while he lived in Bangalore for over 10 to 12 years, he only wanted to go back to the place where his brother was killed. And he wanted to go back to that bridge because he had never addressed this vacuum in his life. And what it did to him was this, that he was angry, he was not worldly wise, he was constantly living in denial of all the things that had happened. My grandmother, an educated woman who knew the ways of the world, but she could not get over the loss of her eldest son, who, at his prime. The entire family somewhere just lost its course. But of course, like a typical middle-class Bengali home, all my pichis were all educated, and they went all of them went ahead, and they were working women. But there was so much of trauma for families that had been destroyed, homes that they had to give up. Like, for example, my grandfather had to leave Dhaka and come to Shillong, just pre-partition. In Shillong, his home was taken over by the locals there. And, they forced us to leave where you are not supposed to switch on the light. So in the evenings, and it's the eastern part, the sunset is very, very early in the evenings. You are to switch off your light. If you don't, they're going to pelt stones till your window panes are broken, and then somebody's going to come into the house to try and kill you. So that house was left, and then all of us dispersed all over the world. And we again bought property in Delhi. And then I had given up my identity of not wanting to be Bengali, I decided to marry out of my community, and I did realize that even there the acceptance wasn't there because the anti-Bengali sentiment was very, very strong. So we've been constantly running from one place to the other without realizing that this shift of losing people, losing community, losing recipes, losing food, losing yourself, you're just being stamped out every time that you're moving on. So yeah, I'm really hoping that I can change some of the stuff in me now, and be a different person, different from how my father was, how my mother is. But I really don't know how much of that I will be able to fully overcome. Yeah.
I think trauma permeates our being because we've been hearing stories since we were little. We might be seeing it if we're lucky enough I was born in London, like I said, but these visits, but more than anything, it's probably what, I hear is the story of the time of the partition and what that meant for my grandfather, grandmother, children, their children, my baba. And I think I want to say here that what has come out of partition is this belief that there were communities not living harmoniously, that there was no cohesion. And I know from my family story that was not the case. In Chitolia, Kushtia Jela, my family, a Hindu family, lived perfectly beautifully with the Muslim community. It was partition that completely demolished any harmony. That is my story, that is our family story. Cohesion completely dismantled because of the partition, not existing necessarily for everyone, maybe pockets, but that's not the story here, that's not the narrative you hear. The British came in to rescue. Well, that is something to the contrary in my opinion. For 3 years post-partition, my family continued to live in Chitolia because that's on the east side of the border. But then in 1950, in July, 75 years ago, just as past, there was looting. There was a whole village of Chitolia completely demolished, and it was a Muslim family that stopped my family, my grandfather. It's very hard to talk about it without getting emotional. That stopped him from being murdered. And I think these are commonplace stories. If we can go further back enough and hear these stories, it will be people who saved other people, communities that saved each other. And that's the reason I'm sitting here today. That day, my father will talk of how the whole house was ransacked, but that my grandmother, who was pregnant with my uncle, had to climb up a tree to be saved. You hear these stories and you're like, you're in disbelief, but it happened because they were just fighting for their lives while there was this massacre going on. My father trying his best, believing in hope, maybe that he could come back to the house, you know, trying to lock up everything. Of course, they never saw that home again. They never saw that land again. It was gone forever. And they came over, they walked over the borderline, and they started afresh in Shonnanga. And my Baba will tell stories of how they had no food. Yes, we had land, privileged to have land, but nothing else. None of the clothes, none of the possessions. That story that you said about, you know, your Baba wanting to go back, Baba did. My sister went when she was very little, but it was like that longing to be back to your roots, to see, to imagine, what does it look like now? What's happened? Could I go back? That is trauma that me and my sister have grown up with, because these are stories that we've heard time and time again, and this uprooting, this word, I was uprooted, it's a common word for us. And it's a difficult one. And I think, how do we move forward? I don't have the answer to that. And I think that's why we've kind of created this forum, right? So that we can start talking about this more openly and challenge this narrative and say, you know, this happened and we live with it and we're going to continue to live with it. Yeah.
Thank you. Sohini?
I actually want to start by saying I feel like at the moment, especially like I do a lot of social media, right? I think we're very desensitized to seeing violence. I definitely feel like that myself. But just it takes a little moment to like close your eyes and imagine someone in your family literally being killed. It's pretty horrific, and I don't think any of us sitting here actually can imagine that, really. And I think with the amount of information and visuals in the world right now, we're quite desensitized to just seeing things and not understanding what that can do to not just that person's family or their community, but generations on. I was not alive when my great-grandfather was alive, who fought for the freedom, but I can feel that, and I think that's really scary actually, because I didn't actually even meet him. I met my great-grandmother, but it's just, I think with the stuff we see and what we're talking about, obviously, but just to address all the horrible, horrible things that are going on in the world right now, I think it's really hard to like convey how awful this is. And I think what's happening now, people are, it's awful, right? But people are going to be feeling those effects in like 70 years time still, and that's what's scary. I think just imagine that amount of pain that we have all become quite normalized to like just visually seeing, hearing about, reading about. And I think when I see stuff going on at the moment, and again, Rijul knows this, I really don't watch the news very much anymore because it hurts me. Not because I don't want to see it or I want to avoid stuff going on in the world, but I've been in one of those families that people don't want to talk about what's happened because it hurts so badly, right? Like, you don't know this person really, even if they might have been a member of your family and they are part of your roots, but you feel that pain, and I think that's really something. And I feel that I can, like, as I'm talking, I'm getting a bit choked up actually, because it's really scary that we can just suppress all of this. And I think Bengalis have done that a lot. My family has done that a lot. People get choked up when you talk about this stuff, and yet we're kind of in this atmosphere in a very safe spot in London, away from all of this, not really knowing what that could feel like for all these people in the world. And I think you all know what I'm trying to talk about, but we see it all the time, we're seeing it all the time, and it's really scary. And I don't know how you move forward from things like that, because now it's very visual. It wasn't very visual maybe 100 years ago. We don't have any concept of what that might have been like. But that sort of pain remains a little bit. I think moving forward for me means openly talking about these things. That's possibly as much as I can do in my work, in my personal life, in my life with my friends, and in my jobs. And I do that quite openly. I want to continue doing that more. I want to keep opening up the space like this, or like every single supper club that we host, where people can talk about these things and it's not that uncomfortable, and that's probably the only thing I can see moving forward. For me, it's carrying on some of those stories and trying to go through that pain a little bit together, possibly, and not shutting it off in this little box and putting it away and then no one talks about it, and that's the end of it. Because we're seeing it unfold now. Those people are going to see it. All those children in Gaza are going to see it in probably the next 70 years if they survive, right? And that pain is a lot. It takes a lot to get over that.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's, I don't know how you move forward, really. I think we can all do our little bits and contribute and speak openly and challenge people when they say things wrong. That's what I would do.
I want to come in there because I'd be so interested when we do open up to Q&A to hear from you guys whether you think that is something you can do. Like, is it fine over dinner to just be, okay, can I just casually talk to you about my uncle who was murdered? They never found his body. It was cut up into pieces, and I still think about that. I don't think you can. I feel like what happened with our family is that there were these atrocities that happened again and again and again. And my dad, this staunch sort of like fighter for justice, and I'm going to spend my life's earnings on taking a case to the Supreme Court to try and change the law. Everyone can't do that. It's difficult stuff. So I just want to acknowledge that I think that's okay as well, because I think, you know, I'm not even sure my best friends know about the murder of my uncle in 1975. It was 50 years ago this year. This year is a very milestone year for our family. He was 35. And there's lots of us in this room who might have, again, stories in our family of people who were just taken away, but AKA murdered. That's another word that I can't just casually talk about. It's really difficult stuff. And I think we're all open to learning about how we can get to a place where we can talk about this more, because actually that is the only way we're going to heal. That's the only way we're going to feel better about this and not feel alone. I think one of the great things about this, with even just meeting Mohua and Sohini, and hopefully you guys will feel the same when you talk to each other, it's like, oh my God, there's someone else who's gone through this. Wow. I've spent, yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult stuff.
And I think it's a shared understanding, even if your experiences are unique to yourselves.
Yeah.
You can understand the pain, I suppose, that kind of underpins it.
Absolutely.
I was reflecting on the language used around tragedy and around what it is, genocide.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember reading in a GCSE history textbook, there was a little text box within a page, within the chapter about the British Empire, and it was a black and white photo of a very emaciated set of people, and it just referred to the famine of Calcutta, and just a little bit about how grain was diverted away, and maybe 2 lines, and that was it. And it reminded me a lot when we started seeing news reports now of sort of the famine in Gaza and this very passive language of essentially a colonial power oppressing someone. And it hurt, and I think I was thinking about why it hurt so much, that specific turn of phrase, and I was relating it back to that. To be honest, I think our experiences are very similar in a cultural, historical sense. I'm not saying what's happening today by any means is the same as what Bengali people endured at all, but I think there is some commonality, I think, which is to think about. So I wanted to come around and, I suppose, wrap up things with today's talk. Thank you all. You've been a very captive and very kind audience. Thank you for that. Before we open up for questions from the audience, is there something you would like our audience members to leave here today thinking about?
Thank you. So I've been relentlessly working and writing on the story of migration and displacement. So I began writing when my son left to study in London, and there was this whole empty nest, and I really didn't know how to deal with it, because that's all I knew, to be a mother. And all I remembered were the stories of people who had been very badly affected with migration, with displacement. So what I do is that I constantly write, and I would share one thing, that embracing your identity, it may be a difficult one. For example, There are many Siletis who eat a fish called shidol. They call it hidol. But people poke fun at them for this fish, even within Bengal. And I just think that it's time that our food, our culture, our heritage, if you don't embrace it, who else will? And it's time for us to not feel shy for that fish head that used to be in my house. And all my, friends who were not Bengali, they used to come to my house and say, "Oh my God, I'm so frightened." Every time there's this fish eye that's staring at you.
It's delicious.
And now I tell them, if you'd had that, you're going to get all the collagen that you keep asking me about. There we are.
No powder.
No powder at all, So yes, embracing your identity, being fearless, and I am unhindered today to write about things that matter to me. From a person who was just writing vegetable lists and home chores and signing report cards, I've written close to 800 or 900 articles across publications. So if I can do it, anybody can.
I'm going to stick to the food topic actually a little bit. I think if I want you to leave with something today, it would be, so again, this kind of comes back to the Bangalis being really bad at marketing themselves. Cook your own food is what I would say. I feel we're very timid and shy to be cooking our own food.
Yes.
Everyone in this country has to cook because we can't afford cooks, let's be honest. So I think sometimes, often, especially with people like my friends, for example, right?
You tickled my sister, I'm not sure. You tickled her.
I'm funny. I think people our age really shy away from either being too scared or too intimidated from cooking Bengali food. Bengali food is not that complicated, okay? In terms of Indian cuisine, it's probably one of the more simpler ones because we don't rely on a crazy amount of ingredients. Cook Bengali food like you would cook a pasta is what I really try and say to most people that come to any of my events. Don't be scared of it, because if we're scared of it, I'm in my 30s now, and like us, our friends, my sibling, cousins, if you're scared of cooking your own food, it will die. It will not be there, because as a people, we've not been amazing at documenting stuff. And that's okay, there's a lot of people doing some amazing work. Actually, Malika's sitting over there, and she's an amazing chef writer and very inspirational for me. People are doing incredible work doing this stuff, but if you don't do it day to day, it's not really going to exist. You don't need to dish out a really thick recipe book or a very long video to go cook some of this food. Ask your mum, ask the help in your house, in wherever they are. I think that's what I want you to take away. Don't be intimidated or scared. And our legacy as Bangalis going forward will only kind of go forward if we as diaspora, or even if you're on holiday here, if we do it day to day, and it's not just, don't save it for that occasion once a year where you're going to get out all these recipes and do all these things, because our legacy isn't as much in writing as it is in doing. And that could even just be hosting or sharing, I don't know, some old movie songs or whatever it is that you may have grown up with or your parents may have grown up with. Don't be scared to take that forward. I think I've really imbibed that in the last decade, and I'm very proud of it. And kind of touching back a little bit on that topic of the horrific genocide that's happening right now, the reason I've been really affected in the last couple of months, and I don't think I've spoken much about it because I really can't, I don't know what to say. It's that erasure. It's happened before. It's happening now. It's very obvious. But if we don't actively engage and continue doing those things that our people, wherever those people are from, are proud of, it does die, and that makes me really sad. So maybe go make a Bengali pasta. I don't know. Everyone seems to be cooking pasta really easily and making salads very easily. Put some Bengali flavors into it. See where that gets you. Because I think that's just the very tip of the iceberg of how we can not let things die out. I'll have your ring.
Not letting things die out, not letting history die out. I mean, Rijul, you talked about it. A small box, a little paragraph about the Bengal famine. Probably nothing else about the 1905 first partition of Bengal. Probably nothing about the displacement post-1947. So I want to leave two things with you. The first thing, I'm borrowing from an event that actually inspired this event by a very wonderful historian called Sohini Banerjee. And I asked her the question, which was, how can a member of the public play a role in changing the national curriculum in this country and ensuring that partition or anything under the British Raj and anything about colonialism is taught in history, formalised? At the moment it's not. If you didn't know that, I mean, to be honest, even as an educator, that strikes me as you have to be someone who wants to teach about that in year 7 to 9, and after that, no, you can't, because it's just not on the syllabus. We can all look at our local school's curriculum on the website, we can challenge them, we can phone them and say, hey, do you teach that? Can you teach that? Can I come in and do a session? It's literally as simple as that. There are active things we can do. Talk to if your children, your nieces and nephews, ask them if they're being taught about this in year 7 to 9, and if they're not, there's something we can do about it. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is kind of what I've been talking about all evening, is being moved, being compelled to want to do something about the state of education in rural Bengal. This year, we have got to a place at Rise where we are kind of putting together a curriculum that can be replicated across Bengal. That's my vision. Across Bengal, east and west, we have a literacy curriculum that can take any child who is not literate and help them get there. And if you're interested in doing some work back home, or whatever it is that people say these days, don't know why I said that, but whatever, back home, then yeah, please get in touch, because I didn't spend sort of 12 years developing a curriculum to help young people learn Bengali just for it to be in one small part of Bengal. We have, at least on the west side, a population of 91 million. There are not even just young people, there are adults who cannot read and write Bengali. And I think we can all in this room be part of solving that. And wouldn't it be amazing in 30 years' time to be like, we've actually moved the dial, we've changed the statistic, and there is a greater literacy rate across Bengal. I think that would be amazing.
Firstly, actually, I really want to thank you all for sitting in this really hot room. It's like, hot yoga vibes without the yoga. Mohua wants to actually finish with a little poem that she's written. So yeah, she just very shyly asked me for a walk. And actually, I also do want to say, Mohua, she probably has spoken the least out of all of us here. She is phenomenal, by the way. I don't know if you can tell. You should go read her books. I just want to say, I actually fangirled over Mohua for a while. And then she replied to me one day on Instagram, and I was like, oh my God. I told everyone that I knew in India, okay? And then she was like, let's meet for a coffee. And I was like, oh my God, this lady is like a celebrity, and she wants to meet me? That's crazy. And then since then, she just keeps denying that she's a celebrity. That's it. Anyway, your poem.
Thank you. So this is something I want to leave with all of you. In all my defeat, I found my strength. In extreme pain, there was no fear or uncertainty. The hydrangeas of my land, blue in color, bloomed unhindered and always bright. Thank you.
All right. Do we have any written paper questions in the audience? Are there any on the tables in front of you? Anyone like to pass them forward? If there aren't, and that's okay, because you've all been listening so attentively, that's why you're not listening. I want to open up the room to questions. So if anyone has any questions, I see a hand at the back. Let's start with Numra at the back.
Hi, thank you so much for such a moving, I'm just going to project rather than away from the mic, but thank you so much. It was an incredibly moving talk today. Just a bit of context. I'm Pakistani, my family was from Rohtak, and all of this really resonates. And I think growing up in the last 75 years, having lived in Pakistan and being part of the diaspora, we kind of taught to be like, India was the enemy, and even now with, sort of national tensions. But knowing Sohini, I also come with a certain amount of bias. She's one of my closest friends. But I was like, there's so much closeness and we connect in so many ways. It's not our shared trauma, it's our shared culture in our, like, the way we cook, the way we host each other, where we're constantly wanting to give each other presents and, like, outdo each other with gifts and, and all that sort of thing. And I think there's so much connection in that. And I think it's really important, actually. I really appreciated how it's not our trauma and our pain isn't something of the past, it exists now. It's ongoing, whether it be flooding, whether it be our national, our political sort of corruption and traumas, and also what's spreading around the world with the genocide in Gaza. So I think that was really important. So it doesn't sound like a question, but it's like, I think it's also like, what do we do? Like, where do we, rather than living with the trauma and reenacting it every time we tell it, what do we go, how do we take action in this world when you feel so helpless? When we are looking through that little tiny window in our phone and seeing so much violence, like, I think it's a question which is, I suppose, I don't know how it's answered, and I think some of it we've answered, but how do you go forward without feeling traumatized?
Well, I think of, we think about like psychological kind of defenses to trauma and what you do with it.
Mental health, but please, thank you.
Something along the
Just
lines
to let
of-
everyone know, Rijul is a psychiatrist. So he was actually on merit for this talk because I thought he could really add to everyone's, just this part of it of like actually how do we go forward from things like this.
No pressure. Brain is sad. Brain is very sad. And what do we do with it? What do we do with that? No, without wanting to make light of it. I think altruism is a really important mechanism against trauma. It's well documented. People that give or create something, create community, give back to the community, it is a really powerful way through trauma. And I think that's what you see in the current day diaspora community. That's how we kind of navigate it. Another way is sublimating, which is actually a fancy word for being creative and making things, whether that's making food, making art. It's another way to transmutate that trauma into something positive, and in theory addressing it. But I wonder if we're a society that's been too repressed for too long, and so part of that process is starting to talk about it again, to stir those feelings again in the present day, and then use that for action in the way that Sanju was saying, about turning that current day anger. I heard a lot of anger in your voice. Why are things like this? What can we do about it? So I think if we just focus on doing nice, good things for other people, sometimes we just forget the kind of core of the trauma existing in the first place. And I think so. There's probably a balance to be struck. That's kind of what I would say in that. But I'm no expert. I mean that in the sense that I don't think any of us are experts in how to handle this degree of intergenerational trauma, whether you're a mental health professional or not. But I wonder if the panel had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I sublimated the whole thing. I began, by writing, and then I started writing in 2018, and then from there have been books, there's been poetry, and I also run a podcast that is for the underdog, and we bring in voices of the unheard, the voiceless. We've had some amazing guests, and that has been a huge cathartic process for me. So yeah, sublimating it is the best way. One of the best ways. Yeah.
I just cook all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a form of sublimation.
I like feeding people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think I
Yeah, you sublimated too,
I did.
like cooking. Yeah.
We have a couple questions.
Yes.
I think there's a few hands. I think I did see your hand earlier.
Yeah.
So if and say your name when you speak, and feel free to stand up as well, because
Or not.
we can see
Or
you.
I can do.
Go for it.
Yeah,
Go for it. Stand up.
We're all friends.
No.
We're all friends here.
I am Karina. For context, I'm a Bengali Muslim poet as well.
Wow.
And something I'm really passionate about is this idea of storytelling and passing on not just our stories, but like our generational stories and stories of my grandmother and my nanny and daddy and everybody. So I guess my question is, as British Asians, as British Bengalis, how do you do that? Where you're not just traumatized, but there's so much culture. How do you keep that culture alive, especially in a day and age where a lot of us have kind of interrace marriages or relationships, you know, how do you balance that? No pressure.
Oh, okay, for me, I think, again, this is my personal take on it. I feel consistency of doing something really helps. I think what happens at the moment, and I keep seeing this so much, people around me, let's say, or people I interact with a lot, it's very, you want instant things, and I'm included in that, to be honest. You want like instant gratification, instant like validation or whatever. I think consistency in doing something for a long time really does help. I've been cooking for like nearly a decade now, and I think only now, probably in the last year, I've come to terms with a lot more things than I would have ever before. So slow and steady is probably what my answer to that would be. Don't expect something to just turn around in a week. It doesn't really work like that. It doesn't happen. Like I said, it took me so long to just cook food that people maybe wouldn't, you know, they wouldn't think of when they book for a fine dining Bengali event, because I get asked to make kosher mangsho a lot. I don't really make it anymore. I make it for us and friends, but as part of what I do, it's taken me a long time. I think consistently doing something for a long time, getting really comfortable. Yeah, that's what I would probably say. I don't know if that answers your question though. Yeah.
Yeah, so no.
You go, Rijul.
You go, you speak.
So I think, you know, I kind of relate to your question in a very huge way, because I too have been divorced from my own culture. So the one way of getting back to it is listening to our music, reading, going back to the language, because what happens is that when you speak about inter-race marriages, inter-race relationships, leaving your cities, going into different places, we forget language. That language of the soul is Bengali language for me. You know, I cannot feel more secure than listening to my ma tell me, bhalo theko, aschi. These are those little words, and I want to continue to do that with my child. You know, and also what I have done is that because I've embraced my identity after many years, so I have found a group of very interesting women, both sitting on this side and someone sitting just next to you. It's my little group of Bengali friends with whom I don't need to explain what I feel. They understand because of the shared culture, because of the shared emotion, and this is one way to keep myself in touch with the inner me. Will that help? I don't know.
I would say start by following these two. I was literally about 8 months ago, and Mohua, the best part of Instagram is when, you know, someone comes to you and you're like, oh my God, you've illuminated my life in a way that...
So we both feel this way about Mohua.
And you know, it was that slice of Bangla. And so obviously, you know, Mohua said bhalo theko, like stay well at kind of the end of the call, or like aschi, I'll be back, or, you know, I'm coming. These are words that, you know, we're so familiar with. So yeah, it's there in abundance. But on a practical level, I think it kind of relates to what Sohini said, like invest time in this. I think we can often sit around, and I do this as well, which is like, I really want to do something. Well, chances are, if you just carve out a little bit of time to start, amongst the plethora of, you know, responsibilities that we have, but start somewhere. And then where do we start? Particularly if it's in storytelling. I went to this great workshop, and a few ladies are sitting here from there a couple of weeks ago. It was basically South Asian poetics, and one of the workshops was by Layla Sumpton, who is an author, and she started this kind of methodology called Her Story. And I'll obviously, you know, please get in touch and I can point you in her direction, but she just started by saying, say you have a story, write it down in 6 words. Start with that. And I think sometimes we feel like, oh my God, the overwhelm, like, oh my God, I've just heard this, I've heard that, I want to remember it all. Write down 6 words, and then maybe you can embellish from there. Yeah. I even think also a basic thing of like, if you're having a conversation, maybe, you know, record it on your phone. I don't know if that's just too basic, but I think we sometimes forget to do those things. Like, I do that a lot now because I feel like I'm, hopefully one day, I don't know, when I'm I don't know, when my sciatica's really got hold of me and I'm going to be immobile, I'll just be able to sit through my phone. That's why I've got the the full storage, not for right now because it's too busy, but for a rainy day. So that's what I would say. Yeah, I hope that's helpful.
And just to add to that, I think if there's not a space for you to express all of that, carve it out. And I think I'm sure you do in your work, but also part of the Bangali story was to platform stories like that and to let people connect and share and open up in a way that's free from judgment, likely to be received well, and hopefully you think, and then also be a source for more artistic exploration further down the line as well. So there are more questions. I think we've got 4 more questions.
Yeah,
and then I think that's all we have time for.
Yeah.
So we'll start here, and then we'll go there, and then over.
I don't mind being at the end because I had some poems that I wanted to sort of recite or perform. One of them is called Roots and All. I don't mind to go now or after.
Go at the end.
Yeah,
we can wrap
we'll
up.
invite you up at the end. You can say
yeah.
with the microphone. Yeah. Over there.
Is it possible to have a mic? I don't know if my voice carries.
We're good.
Okay, brilliant. Hearing. So, bit of a preamble. Like, whenever I've introduced myself as Bengali, I've always been asked, but which Bengali? Indian Bengali or Bangladeshi? So I have to sort of.
I think we all have.
my Bengaliness. And then I've said Bangladeshi Bengali. They sort of, their faces dropped, almost as if I don't qualify as being Bengali. In the context of India sort of uprising Bengalis and making out as though we're overtaking India and somehow infiltrating the land, how do we sort of bridge this weird disconnect between Indian Bengalis and then Bangladeshi Bengalis? How do we just make it so that we're just Bengalis as opposed to being based on geopolitical divides, based on the Bangali line? How are we just Bengali regardless of those kind of divides?
Celebrating, I guess, our shared culture.
Microphone.
Celebrating our shared culture. I do a lot of writing where I know that, my father's side of the family is from East Bengal and we are Bengali. And we've grown up with the same kind of food that's cooked, in this part of Bengal and the other part of Bengal. So I think sharing stories and, right? Yeah.
Funnily enough, I've had a lot of the opposite recently. In the last couple of years, at least, every time I say I'm Bengali, and then I'm say if the conversation goes further, what Bangali, and then people are really. I've had people tell me that I'm not Bangali because I'm from Kolkata, and I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't really know that. Okay, thank you, Uber driver. I've actually been told that a lot in my Uber rides for some reason. Anyway, I think, again, I think the same thing of the shared culture, because it's very real. My grandma's part of the family is also from East Bengal, and I think as people we know that's very true. Probably the one lady who might be in charge of Bengal is not helping that right now. That's fine. There's always troublesome politicians, I feel. But I think within our people and friendship groups and communities, I think it can really comfort to just know that does exist. There's no other, we are literally the same people. I don't think there's any differences.
I too don't think so.
There's no differences, I would say, apart from, I don't know, people try and say there's religious differences, but even that, some of my grandma's best friend was actually Muslim and she was Bangladeshi. So again, it doesn't really matter as much. I think finding that community is really key, and hopefully spaces like this can help, and I think there will be more of these. So you will have your space, I think.
I think it's always coming in with history is very important, and I just want to share that. I recently had this learning about 1905. So obviously 1905, first partition, Curzon comes along. It was annulled in 1911, just 6 years later. But for 6 years, Bangalis were now East Bengal or West Bengal. And Tagore came along and said, I'm going to write this song, which we know, Amar Shona Bangla, to unify Bangalis, to unify East and West, because the Brits had come along and divided. So I feel like we just need to think about 120 years ago. Now that wasn't that long ago. 120 years ago this year, we could all relate to being Bengali. We had a unified song, obviously that then became the Bangladesh national anthem. Again, that in itself for me has blown my mind in terms of cohesion. But if we don't know this, how can we feel like we are connected? And so even if it takes some time, and I taught at Mulberry School for Girls when I taught maths after I did the Teacher S program, and it was 95% Bangladeshi. And I was like, no, it's 95% Bengali. We're all Bengali. And they'd be like, Miss, are you Bangladeshi? And I'd be like, yeah. They're like, but I thought you said you were from Kolkata. It's like, yeah, but, and I'll be like, should I teach math or shall I give them a history lesson? I think we need to take the time, and we need to be bold and have courage to take the time. Like if someone's coming at you, give them a 2-minute little lowdown of something that's going to help them. Right?
Know their history better.
It reminds me of what you said earlier, is education is the way out. I think when you educate people around you and those that maybe aren't aware of these, these very, generated divisions and fissures in Bengali culture and Bengali identity, we didn't want this. We neither side really asked for this, in all honesty. And so I think reminding ourselves, reminding others around us of that fact, and also not feeling too far removed from the 120 years ago, the 75 years ago. It's not that long ago, as you say. A lot more has happened. That was far further back in time that we think about far more prominently than that. We had a couple of questions over here. We had one there, and then okay, we've got 2 here. So we'll go at the back there. And please say your name if you can, if you feel.
Hi.
Oh, you're in the same angle.
I'm afraid you'll now need to fight.
So I'll go first. I'm Devinder, and for context, I am married to a Bengali, so I guess I can see the
Don't worry.
My wife is Bengali. I just want to thank you for bringing the points you raised. I am a kind of a person who does things without thinking about them. And what you brought up has made me think a lot about the things I've been doing for the last year and a half. And the points Rijul raised as well, I think it's been fantastic. Thank you again for helping get some clarity on it. For the last year and a half, we've kind of, I've got a small restaurant in Tufnell Park. And what we've been doing is, the restaurant's been 5.5 years ago, 5.5 years ago, but for the last year and a half, we're doing something called Home Away from Home. So we created this little corner of Punjab in Tufnell Park. Completely out of context, it doesn't belong there, but I don't really care because it makes me feel good about it. So we do things like Chabil, which is giving out free drinks on every Saturday, Sunday when the day is hot and things like that. So I guess it kind of makes sense why I do this, but I didn't really think about it. So I guess you want to keep it. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
It's very kind. Thank you. And guys, I want to shout out East West Pizza because that's Devinder's little restaurant in Tufnell Park. Phenomenal. If you're ever in the area, or if you're not in the area, make a trip there like we did and check out their food. We have one more question over there, and then one more in the corner here.
Hi, my name is Tejas. I moved here from Kolkata 8 years ago. And when I first moved here, I was very ashamed of being Indian. So before anybody could make fun of me, I would make fun of myself for being brown, for being gay. But now that I'm getting more comfortable with it, I do not really agree with people making these comments about us Indians, about us brown people. My question is, how do we stop this casual racism without it getting fighty?
That's a hard one.
One piece, maybe?
I think I probably do. I have to cycle back to what Sanju said about educating and just taking that moment of not getting immediately angry, because that's very valid as well. But I don't know, just sharing a bit about your story in as little as you can. Actually, for this morning, this is a very current story, okay? Me and Sanju were chatting on a video call before I went into my work shift. And a man walked past and was very rude to me about apparently being too loud. I really wasn't being very loud. I was talking very normally on a video call. And he said, oh, I can hear you all the way from down the block and it's just really rude. And I was like, firstly, it's 9:30, you should be awake. And secondly, I'm just on a video call and I can hear your music, but I didn't say anything. It's just they're very micro aggressions, and it happens a lot. It happens to anyone in any field, not just creative field. And by the way, he said that because he knows I work for this cafe and I make Indian food every Monday. I think just that education bit, that's what I would say. I know it's really hard and I struggle with that myself. I'm sure as you stay here, you'll get used to explaining yourself a little bit more. I think we are very lucky, I would say, for or at least the three of us here, that we've lived here enough to not have to explain as much, because we've got our own communities and friends and very strong friendships at that. But when we moved to Australia very briefly, we had to explain so many things. And I can see, I know how you feel, because it's happened, like people coming over and you're like, well, why are you eating with your hands? Why are you not using this and that? I think it just probably slow and steady bit of education. I've made a lot of people eat with their hands that have never picked up anything beyond the chicken wing. So I think, yeah, slow and steady.
I think telling someone, and we can't always do that. And I think to myself, like, I grew up in Camden on a council estate, was predominantly white, went to a state school, predominantly white. My friends are all white. My Bangali connection is with my sister and like our family back home. And I feel like when I experience racism, I don't know who I can tell. And I want to be able to say that was really uncomfortable and I experienced that. And I think there was a time, obviously the riots, they were just last year. And my bestie was like, Shani, are you okay? She was a handful of white people that asked me if I was okay. Again, it's that whole kind of the anti-racism movement and talking to your, Caucasian friends, telling them about these experiences, because they're not going to know. The chances are your Caucasian friends are not the ones that are going to be the racist ones. They came out of the woodwork last year, didn't they? I feel like, I'm not a prolific Instagrammer. I barely have any followers. And even they managed to, just because I write one haiku, because we talked about obviously being creative is my traumatic outlet. And then suddenly it was like, go back home. I was like, I wasn't even talking to you, mate. So tell. As hard as it is, and I would say, do you know what? I just thought in that moment, tell us, write to us, and then that'll be an ear, because that's what we need.
The whole UK actually have banning haikus on their nightclubs. So that might be why you got this I'm seriously, sorry that. Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah.
Mohua, anything you'd like to add on that?
No, thank you.
We have one more question right behind me here.
Yes. Hi, I'm Sejati. And my question to you is, knowing what you know now, what would you do differently, say, 10 or 15 years back?
Watch less Bollywood movies. I feel like 90% of my brain is Bollywood, so maybe watch a bit less Bollywood movies, do more studying about the history of India, maybe. I don't know. Yeah.
I think I would have been more proud of the place I come from. I would have embraced the partition without hiding. I would have embraced a lot of my food without feeling the need to explain why I eat what I do. I think just about embracing myself, I think I would have done it way earlier. Realizing that there is a lot of strength inside each individual, but we are often so caught with so much of a conversation that goes on, a narrative that goes on outside, that we are very frightened to break that wall. I would have broken the wall earlier. That's that one thing I would have done.
So beautifully put. I think I wouldn't have joined Accenture. Oh, that's so crazy, but honestly, what a waste of my time. For 10 years I was a management consultant at the world's largest global management consulting firm. Give me strength, because I have come out of it now, and the reason I'm able to sit in this room, because the chances are if I was on a project, I'd be at work, right? I didn't have a life. I thought I had a life. I was like, eating canapes and drinking wine, getting myself a liver problem, blah, 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 blah. But basically, if you think you are not in a role, in a job, doing the things that you love doing, it's tricky, but get yourself out of there. Obviously I say that, turns out maybe I can change the law in this country for women with endometriosis, so maybe there was a reason that I was at Accenture. And it's hard. It's hard work, it's hard work. There's so many things that are affecting people, and then we sit there day to day, the hard graft in the corporate world, you know, for what? To what end? This is the meaningful, important stuff. If you have a road or a world into doing this kind of work, oh my God, you're the luckiest person ever. And I think that more, you know, I always talked about doing Rise as a side hustle. I wore that as like a badge of honor, like I'm so amazing. I work during the day and at night, on the weekends, it's like, are you mental? Probably. I really genuinely think, like just, I think it's like spending that time meaningfully if you can.
Other management. Other management consulting firms are available. Just accept, you can insert other ones there, of course. I wanted to thank you all again. A big round of applause for yourselves. And we hope you've enjoyed what is the first edition of the Bangali Story. There is hopefully going to be lots more to come.
Hopefully.
Watch the space. We want to feature lots more voices, a whole plethora of stories that are still yet to be told. East and west of that divide that we've spoken about a few times today. So if you would please be so kind as to leave some feedback for us. Just scan the QR code on your tables. Let us know your honest, unfiltered thoughts, because it's really helpful to get an idea of whether this was at all meaningful or important to people, and if you would do things differently as well. So thank you again so much for attending. If you'd like some more food.
She wanted to read her poetry.
Ah, yes. How could I forget how rude of me? Come to the front, please.
Also, can we just take a look at her t-shirt?
Love it.
Oh my
Wait, let's
gosh.
see.
It's 12.
So, Russia Dilgari,
Please introduce yourself.